tuna, ham, turkey.
There's a couple more in there.
Roast beef.
Check
You
them.
need sandwich.
Whatever we got. I'm not picky. Just give me a breath. I don't want to get hand arthritis.
Do I need to do anything officially reconvene, Jackie?
You already did it in there.
Go. Alright, perfect.
We will call Clint in about 10 more minutes, so he'll join us in about 10 more.
Okay. So we should be on 2.8, discussion of proposed Academy Village sign plan, Mike?
Yes. And this is just to give you a heads up on a future text amendment that the council will be reviewing. This again is for the Academy Village project. The developer of that center is asking for some signs that are taller than we typically allow in our current ordinance. And so what they will be proposing is a zoning text change to allow the sign package that was submitted to you in your packet for
From what I
tonight.
could tell, that was the main thing, is the signs are 5 feet taller than what we allow.
So most of our sign ordinance really is encouraging monument signs. And monument signs are typically 6 feet tall, maximum. We do allow for center signs in planned development, but they're typically 15 feet tall. So they're of course asking, and
Is that right? 50 feet tall?
15 under the current code in the C2 zone.
Is what's allowed and what are they asking for?
50. Now, just put that in perspective though, that's the same height that is allowed by the Center Cal project in Riverton. So their proposal is not unlike other commercial centers of similar scale in the valley.
Potentially put them at a disadvantage to
Right.
the center now.
Right. So the process, of course, is that they will need to file a formal zoning text amendment application. We've been told by John Lensley's group that they will prepare that text amendment. They've shared with us the images, but we haven't seen the actual text proposal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The design.
Yeah.
So we'll do an internal review on that. Planning Commission, of course, will review that in a public hearing. Make a recommendation to the City Council. And then we will give you the opportunity to discuss it in a work session and then make the final decision in a business meeting. This is the site, of course, undeveloped, Pot 35 and 39, just kind of northeast from Mountain View. And then this series of images that were in your packet. Now we've talked quite a bit about this site plan is dependent on the whether or not garage structures are developed on the site. However, the location of the signs, we've asked John if the sign locations would change even if the site plan changed, and he said these are pretty accurate to what he's anticipating, regardless of what happens on the garage development. Again, 50-foot tall LED signs, consistent with what we're seeing on Mountain View corridor already. These monument signs would also be taller than we typically allow. This type of signage is permitted and it would not require an exception in our sign ordinance. Yeah, they're trying to create some distinct, design through the center. Wall signage, again, is all permitted. So those elements will be fine. It's the height of the freeway-oriented signage and then the height of the monument signs. We'll be asking, we're proposing a text change to allow those things in the center.
And it's gone through planning commission first, though, right?
It has to go to commission first. This is even again, they haven't even submitted a formal application yet.
Okay.
But we want to let you know that this will be coming towards you soon.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the anticipation is it'll be very narrowly drafted, so it doesn't apply to other places in the city.
Yeah.
Well, I guess maybe we have to think ahead though for the auto mall. They're likely going to ask for some stuff over there. So
Absolutely right.
So we do have some sign regulations in the auto mall, and as we've been talking with our partners, we've told them that if there's anything in our current ordinance that is a concern, to let us know. So far, we haven't had any specific concerns identified, at least not in the planning department. I don't know if economic development has heard anything specific, but I've talked with Larry a couple of times, and he hasn't indicated that he has any problems at this point in time. In the auto mall. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the tenants and it will set a precedent if you allow, you have to be careful for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Need anything from us? Or?
Nope, there's just a heads up.
Okay, any questions, council, discussion? Alright, 2.9, proposed Ivory Homes agreement relating to elementary school located in the Danzy annexation area of the lake.
Just in time. Might need a safe walker out here too, so. We've been talking about it. So this is an item that I brought back because we had direction from the council about a month and a half ago to work on an agreement with Ivory Homes and the school district, and I think that's all the parties asked to get this done. So just to kind of back up, here's the site. We were looking at where to put the next school in Herriman. The school district was looking in this area. There's one that's going to go up in the Daybreak area. And as we met with the school district and talked, this Danzy location seemed like the most logical place to place a school to alleviate some of the crowding that we're seeing in some of the existing Herriman schools. And the school district already owned the property, so it was cost savings to them. This is the boundary for Bastion Elementary, which is what's causing this need for a new school. Bastion's scheduled to be over capacity next year and then be really over capacity the year after that. So as the school at the Danzy property gets constructed and proposed to open in 2022, this boundary will change and we'll be able to offset some of the overcrowding at these other area schools. And there's the other area schools. I just wanted to highlight those and show where they were at, so we can kind of see what's going on here. And there's the Danzy school.
And there's a new charter.
And the new charter school. So the outline of my presentation here is we're gonna talk about the scope of improvements. This is basically the bones of the agreement that we're gonna put together. We're gonna talk about the scope. We're gonna talk about the schedule. We're gonna talk about the financial plan, how this works out. And then an assurance to make sure these improvements get done, and if they don't get done, what happens? Who's on the hook for putting them in? So the scope of improvements, I've highlighted this black circle or cloud around. It highlights the roads that are eligible for reimbursement through impact fees or any other means. Right now in the master development agreement, they're eligible for reimbursement through impact fees only. The roads that are over here, the red, yellow, and this portion of green, they're actually developer project improvement roads, so they are going to be paid for 100% by the developer. They're not reimbursable.
Which, if you don't mind, there seems to be a lot of confusion around the two things, right? There's at least when I talk to people, Limpy Hills and however you pay for things, etc. I apologize for derailing to Limpy Hills, but part of what they're claiming and other developers claim is, oh, well, we're so benevolent, we're going to put in the roads, etc. in our project. They do that anyway, it's required, right? It's the roads that connect them to
the way our standards
impact
written
on everything else, the impact.
So the way our standards written is, or our impact fee study is done, is if it's a 60-foot road or a 53-foot wide road, which are local roads, they're required for the development and they're not reimbursable unless there's some agreement that has been done, a master development agreement that says they are. Otherwise, they're not. If you do a 68 or an 80, these are just our standard road cross sections, or 106 or 116, then you're eligible for reimbursement. And some cities, their impact fees reimburse just the upsize of the road. Our impact fee reimburses curb to curb cost. So it's not the upsize, it's the whole cost of the road. And that keeps your impact fee up. Our impact fee right now is $2,100 per door for a single family house. And so we're doing a study right now, and that's part of this later discussion is the study, the impact fee may go down because we've been building infrastructure like crazy for 20 years now. And so we're getting to the end of all of our capital facility roads, so the fees are gonna be less now. But then the system roads that I have up here, they're the ones that we're gonna have to talk about reimbursing the developer. So you can see the green portion next to pod 7, that one is gonna be required for pod 7. So it's eligible for reimbursement, but they're not gonna have to build that to service the school. It's for their development. So this could be part of a separate reimbursement agreement. I'm not sure how Ivory wants to do this, if they wanna have all these impact fee eligible roads in this agreement, or if we wanna just, we need to negotiate on that, and that's where I kinda need some direction from council tonight, how to go. The Orange Road, their next, one of their pods is right here on the south side of Main Street. And then you can see their pods they're doing, and then Perry Homes is doing a pod up in this area. And those are all expected to start collecting impact fees before this April 2022 date of the Blue Road. And so that one could be a separate reimbursement agreement or tied to the same as this one. The Blue Road, as we see here, is going to be required for the school, and that's the portion of road that's going to need to be built out of phase. So it's not next to any of their imminent development. It's kind of out ahead of their development. And that's the one we're going to have to come to terms. How do we reimburse them on it? So that's the scope. Is these are the roads getting built, and I believe this is the key one we need to negotiate how that's going to get built. This one is also their entrance into pod 6 is on the east end, so that's also part of the out of phase construction. Is that east tail of the Blue Road. And I'll keep this map up as we go through the next parts. So here's the schedule we're kind of looking at, and I lined the dates up with the colors of the roads and kind of see what's going on there. But these are kind of what I'm anticipating putting in as a schedule in the agreement, as to this needs to be done by this date, this needs to be done by this date. This one's probably the most self-explanatory slide, pretty easy to follow. And then the financial plan. So we've kind of went through today. I met with Alan and Brett, and we talked about the fees that we could anticipate coming in. I talked about the impact fee possibly going down. So I made some calculations and with an assumption that this impact fee would be reduced if when the impact fee study is complete here in the next couple of months. And so we're anticipating that, I'll let my spreadsheet over here, that in those pods 4, 5, 6, 7, and then the ones that I didn't highlight on here, because they're the Perry Homes, pod 1 and pod 20, they'll all be bringing in impact fees, and I anticipate we'll bring in around $500,000 by 2022 in impact fees. And that's, some of it will collect the higher amount that we have right now, and some of it will be the lower amount, because I'm anticipating it'll go down. The cost of this blue piece of road, I've estimated it at $1 million. So we're a little short on that if we bring in $500,000. The green piece of road that's reimbursable, that is about $225,000. And the orange piece of road that you can see, that's about $1.95 million. Danzies have a whole bunch more development to happen over the next several years. So that's why we're kind of looking at how's this timing work on payback. The blue piece of road we can pay back since they're building it out of phase and we're all working together and coordinating. Maybe we can work out something with them to pay that back, but the other part might need to be paid back as impact fees come in on the rest of the Danzig development. As the development agreement was done, we always understood that the impact fees collected here, even with the higher rate of $2,100 per door, was never going to cover the cost of these roads. And as the development agreement was negotiated, that was always understood by the master developer. So our risk here is if the school didn't go here and it went somewhere else, we could let the developer build these roads, and we could just reimburse them as we always anticipated with the master development agreement. And there was always going to be a shortage, but the city wasn't going to be left holding the bag on the shortage. This one could leave us a little more at risk or exposed
that
hold
same
back.
plan, they would build it as it suits them, not necessarily that suits us as schools.
Yeah. The side of it is, if we don't participate, then the school could go elsewhere. So the last part that I wanted to go over is the assurance, making sure it gets done. And this is the part I was just kind of hinting at, was the risk. So if Ivory doesn't get this road built, who's on the hook for building it? Is the city? The agreement needs to spell this out. Does the school district come in and build it and we pay them back? Is the school district able to even do that? So these are all things that I think I'll just need direction from council on how you want us to proceed, and then we can set up some meetings and have everybody in the room with the school district and Ivory as we negotiate these terms.
Well, do it as favorable to us as possible.
But it seems like if we build it, it always costs more money if the city has to do it, right?
There's bonding, and we have to go with the lowest bidder, and there's just a bunch of other requirements.
School district has the same problem.
Same deal.
They have to they bid it out. The developer, they take the lowest bid, they build it, we check their numbers,
Right.
validate that before they get reimbursed, but, we knew there was a risk, and I think the conversation's even leading into this. I don't think the council was blind by issue, or we knew we were gonna be the little partner in this, to make this happen. Cause I believe collectively, I got direction from you, we believe this location for the elementary school is the best interest of Herriman at this time.
And all the global issues involved.
Yeah, it shrinks up all our boundaries, pull kids back in, you have what, 17 or 18 portables at Butterfield Canyon. That's not a good environment. The principal's doing a wonderful job up there, but they have a lot of kids up there. So it is placed in the right location, it's just roads are not there yet. So the risk of the city is, I think we have to kind of have a commitment in this letter to Ivory Homes and the school district that we will have that backstop. We also talked about, we'll go out to court orders prioritization money to buy right away and get that money back from Ivory Homes' pocket for that right away. So we're working on our mechanisms, but they're all question marks. There's risk, because nothing's nailed down yet. So this meeting is really to inform you of the options. I still feel strongly this is the best thing for our community, and I'd recommend still pursuing it, unless something really starts falling apart and we go, okay, time out. Even the school district was willing to upfront their impact fees to get the road built on time.
That was gonna be my next question.
And then
You mentioned impact fees.
And then we reimburse ourselves those buckets as, we should have collected those money, put them in the right buckets, and Alan's been very part of this conversation. It's just another tracking mechanisms his financials have to do, which is another daunting task, but it's a timing issue is all it really is.
So from a planning point of view, there's the old adage that I abide by is you hope for the best, plan for the worst. My mind automatically goes to the worst. We're talking about Hopkins case, the worst case scenario. What are we on the hook for, right? Because what they want is a backstop, right? We tell them this is where the school's gonna go, we'll have the road done. Well, if for some reason Ivory doesn't perform, they don't build the roads, we don't close the impact fees, we still have to get the road there, so the school's going.
Looks like about $500,000.
So worst case scenario.
Yep.
Alright.
Do we have that access to impact fee money? How are we gonna come up with $500,000? So we'd be good. Another reason I would lean towards that, even though I do not like taking from Peter to pay Paul, those kind of things, is that I feel like it's critical infrastructure, the same thing as any infrastructure that we talk about. If we're gonna develop, we have to have schools.
And you also heard the conversation in the school district that, and it's just not committed, but they have a strong interest in building that middle school right away too, within a 5-year plan.
Yep.
Which is a good plan, because it pulls those lot of those kids out of Fort Herriman, and shrinks those boundaries in the right direction, so we're not crossing mountains. There's a lot
A lot of advantages to building that.
yeah, huge safety issues you're solving.
You know, though, when you say robbing Peter to pay Paul, when we're doing a reimbursement agreement, they're most likely gonna be just from that area. We've got some more, but mostly they're just that area. But in general, our impact fees are in a pot that we use on the greatest priority, because you can't get enough here and here and here to hit each priority. You
It's not
have to
100%.
bundle them together to get those bigger priorities. So sometimes money from here is building a road somewhere else, but it's tied with money from those places as well, so it's a struggle to do it all at once, in all of the areas, so. We're essentially using the pot for the whole city by whatever priorities are set, through our budget process.
So based on other needs that we have or timing of things, based on the amount that's in the budget, you feel we could cover that 500,000?
Yeah, we could do that, as long as we don't recommit that sometime in the next 2 years.
Yeah, keep us reminding us that.
I estimated
Good
the
thing we have somebody to
schools,
keep track of that.
I estimated the schools' impact fees, and they're gonna be, somewhere in the neighborhood of about $350,000.
Schools.
So that's good, we're all kind of are putting a little skin in.
The school district's always been a really good partner. I mean, we still haven't sent them the final bill on the high school and elementary down in Mountain Ridge. And we know about what that dollar is. We're not hurrying for the dollar, but they know they're gonna pay it, so it's all good. It's just waiting for, we're ready for them to receive it and spend it in the right direction, so. What I like about this plan, Council, I can't say this enough, is, and you were in that other meeting and talked about how it shrinks these boundaries. And this is already shrinking the boundary. We're having a problem with the kids we have now, not the ones moving in, the ones we have right today. That's why the plan is so good.
Well, that's been part of our discussion with the school district board members, is we view the school district buildings, et cetera, as critical infrastructure, just like roads, sewer, et cetera. And so we hope to have them involved in more of these conversations. For this in particular, I guess, my direction would be, if that's worst case scenario, I'm comfortable with that, pursue the best course for us as far as timing and adequate use of the resources we have, but I'm comfortable with that level of risk.
And I also say this, and I don't know if Clint's back on or not, but
He's just
the
waiting
public
for us
works
to
part of COG that comes out of that for corridor preservation monies, we will definitely have him involved or other council members to help on the political side as we put those proposals in. We have probably 4 to 5 chances to get money out of that for Main Street and other roads, so we have some good policies.
I got an update on that. I just heard it this afternoon at about 4:55.
Okay,
We had the TACCOM, or the COM meeting, TACCOM, with Wasatch Front Regional Council today. The county's changing their application process.
Of course they are.
Once a year, and it's in the end of September, because they wanna get the pot bigger and they had too many applications coming in for every 6 months.
so the pot's usually around 1.5 or maybe a little bit more biannually, and now that means there's going to be probably $3 to $3.5 million
She
in the
said
pot.
2.9, I think.
How much?
2.9.
Well,
You're right on.
Yeah.
Part of what we're hoping with our Southwest kind of coalition is what you saw happen in Port Rockwell, right? But, oh my gosh. Our neighbor city. Lovedale, thank you. I wanna say Butterfield.
That's where I live.
But Lovedale needed us to agree with them to get a higher amount of dollars to preserve that corridor for that road that benefits all of us. And if we can continue to work together with sister cities, because part of that process is they want to divvy some out to everybody. It's a political pot, right? It's a trough everybody goes to. So if we can gang up with people with similar interests.
Yep. You're right on, and we'll talk about how both roads actually do benefit the development around that area. Main Street, you've heard conversations about that, it needs to be widened. So, we have a good story to tell.
Especially we're partnering with the school district, they see that we're willing to put our money where our mouth is and whatnot, I think we're in the right direction.
So, okay.
Like we said, there's 2 birds with 1 road
Yeah,
over here
and
too.
it's a safety issue too, again, because see all those pods, there's no school close by for those kids to go, those houses are coming. Cause
Right.
Butterfield Canyon is already
There, I know.
bursting
Very
at the
close to, yeah.
seams, so they're gonna all have to be bussed out of there, which puts more kids on the road and buses and things like that, so it's just better.
And we love to engage in the school with locations. Always look at Black Ridge. It took them 7 years to decide to go to a school location. It only has 1 bus going there.
Yeah.
That's rebuild schools.
Saves everybody money.
That's another burden the
it's
school
safer.
has to pay for by state statute, how they'll save money, so less buses, more money going to the kids at school.
So I'll work close with John and Alan as we work through all the details on this and get the agreement in the right spot.
You have what you need more
I
detail from us?
think if you think of something else after, you can email and we can get the terms in there.
One thing about this too is they were, school district was gonna perform an analysis. They have a bunch of software and data to kind of determine to support the idea of it going here.
Where the schools.
Do we know when that's gonna be
There's some
completed, or are you
negotiating
gonna give
on
us some
purchase. I
feedback
feel
on that?
strongly about this location, because what does
Yeah.
Clark Canyon and
Yeah.
Herriman Elementary. But the question they had really was trying to understand what's happening in that southeast Herriman area.
Yeah.
And they feel that's where the tool's gonna become more valuable, on where the schools on both sides of the mountain quarters, we don't have kids crossing them.
Got it.
That makes really
Pressure
sense.
on
Right.
it.
Got real good data.
My
It delays
understanding is-
that.
My understanding is they have to purchase that software. It's a big buy, I think.
Yeah,
Got it.
I had notes that Butterfield Canyon has 13 portables, Herriman Elementary has 7. Those start to disappear when you start offloading them with this
Yeah.
school. Bastion has 4,
I just
but it's gonna grow.
Thank you for correction.
So, but regardless, they're maxed out at their portables and,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just
Everything.
too much.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
print out.
Alright, so
The one we're using.
Hey there.
That one you.
Hey, Dave.
Your battery says it's up.
we are moving to item 2.10, public improvement district redevelopment agency, community development agency, training and Rose Crest
Lean
Business
away.
Park community agency use of funds. Al,
Okay, first I just wanna talk about the public infrastructure districts, because this is new this last year, Senate Bill 228, created the public infrastructure districts. We're starting to get requests for these. We got a request this week from the auto mall developers to use a PID to do their internal.
The only comment I'd make with that is this is a bill that's gonna come back this year for some tweaking I've heard.
We don't know what's gonna happen
So
with
Jared
it at this
Olson,
point.
sending it, he'll watch
But we're starting to get requests. We've had several of the developers in the southeast area looking at it as a way to finance, stuff there. Can't say this for true, but I've heard that Olympia is trying to finance using a PID to do their infrastructure.
heard that rumor too.
Okay, so, what it is,
That's the only way, I mean, it's one of the only ways that they could do it.
Could do it out
They
there.
don't, county doesn't collect the impact, so they don't
No.
build that infrastructure.
no, okay, so, a public infrastructure district is proposed by landowners. It includes what the boundaries are. You have to have 100% of the landowners that do this. In a lot of ways, it follows an SAA kind of plan, but I'm told it was done this way to avoid some of the headaches of trying to get an SAA in place.
Like residents not wanting.
Yeah, like
higher
residents
tax
not
rates.
wanting to, so,
Right.
but in this particular case, it has to
Take
be
that choice away.
It has to be 100% of the landowners, so typically that's gonna be your developers who are the only owners of the property, okay?
Yeah, a large landowner.
Okay, the city has to approve the district.
So
Now, we've been told that we have to write rules of how we're going to accept these and how we're going to evaluate them and so forth. I've got a sample of some that we need to do, but before we let one go, we've gotta write the rules so that they're all treated the same, okay?
Is there any
If
kind of
we in fact
requirement
decide to do them,
Is there any kind of requirement as far as when we have to write said rules?
before we accept the first one.
So we can tell them, no, we don't have any rules set up.
That's what I've been told. Okay, now the city needs to approve the district. And when you approve it, you will also be stating what infrastructure can be built with it. And, you know, as we've met with each of the developers, you sit with the developers and they see this money out there that they can get, and all of a sudden their project grows by what they wanna build on. But as you go through the approval process, you define what infrastructure they can build with. Now, once the city approves the district, you have no more oversight of the district. They're on their own. okay? They gotta give us a report once a year, but it doesn't say what has to be in that report, okay? But we have no authority over them after we approve them, okay?
Do we have any liability? When they
Uh,
can't
no, we
perform, do
don't.
we have to pick up service?
Well, you know, the services all become ours.
Yeah, it's like
Okay.
HOA design.
But the initial board is appointed by the city, so when the board, the district is created and you designate it, you create the first board, but after that, it's just a regular election. And the landowners are the only ones that can be on the election, okay?
Funny how that works, huh?
Yeah, you have to be a landowner, so the city cannot be represented on the board unless they are a landowner.
So I just have to say, I read through all of this ahead of time, and I was hoping you were gonna say some different things that actually went through these bullet points.
No, once you create it, it's a done deal. Now, once the district's created, the district can set a tax rate on the district. Okay, they can go out and create a tax rate, and, you know, you can determine that based on what infrastructure they're gonna build, what, administrative costs they think they're gonna have, but they can set a tax rate that is equal to 15 mil, okay, that's, currently, our residents pay 14.059 mil. So, if they went to the maximum in this district, it would be doubling the property taxes on this area. Okay? A little more than double. So it's in addition to what we're doing. So if they took the total that they're allowed to assess, the district could assess as much as 29, what did I do?
So let me ask you this really fast, Ellen, on that figure, so we're at 14 mil, does that mean like, so like say with my property tax to Herriman might be $200 a year,
Okay.
but that's to Herriman, so.
No, this is not just Herriman.
It's the
This
whole
is
thing, right?
everybody.
That's what I thought,
This
so,
is-
so if my property tax is 5,300, I might go
You
to
would pay
10,600,
Yeah.
that's what I
But
thought.
5,300 pays for, 27 different things on the right.
Yeah.
The other 5,300 would pay for
One thing.
just the developer's
Just the developer.
infrastructure. Yeah.
Okay? So, they can set the rate. Now, there is a clause that I read in there that says that that rate can even be higher depending on what their bond payments are. Okay, so they can, if their bond,
This is supposed to
Debt
help
service.
affordable housing.
well, yeah. Okay.
Wow.
They have to go through the same process as the city has to go to set the tax rate, but when they're setting it, it's the district setting it, and it's the landowners that are the only ones that have a say,
And
okay?
they might not even have a single resident yet, so
Okay.
they could just set it.
And additionally to setting the tax, the district has the ability to charge administrative fees, so if they've got office costs or insurance or whatever they're doing, they have the ability to set an administrative fee. Okay?
Kind of
Keep smiling because
This is really as bad as it sounds, isn't it? You're paying
This
for
isn't the
holy
fox
moly.
guarding the hen house, this is locking the fox inside and walking away.
That's right, I was curious though, and I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're
I
fine.
never
Before the
remember hearing
MDD
about this
district.
legislation last year.
Yeah, we didn't hear
I didn't
anything.
hear
Yeah, nothing,
anything,
nothing
I
from,
didn't hear the
It was
league say
nothing from the
anything about it,
league,
nothing.
nothing.
I called the Utah Taxpayers Association and they didn't know about it.
How did this get passed?
The league did have a PowerPoint presentation that I saw, and they made some points that, okay, semi-valid, but these concerns are, I think all of our concerns are very real.
We spent a ton of time up there
Yeah.
every single day, working with all of our, not a word, the first time I heard anything about this was the last council meeting before Alan mentioned her. Sorry, I know you're not even a fraction of the way through this.
No, we're fine, but based on whatever the tax estimates are, based on the levy they put, they can then go and bond. Okay, they can go borrow money just like the city does, using
That's what this.
the property taxes as security. Now, the bond can be as long as 40 years long.
Leverage.
And they must have all the property owners approve it. Okay, it's still the developer probably when they do this. So they can approve it, go for a bond. Now, you can't use the improvements as security. The only thing you can use as security is the property. It's a general obligation bond. So this bond will attach to the property. Okay, for 40 years.
Lobbying for it,
It's
for
a free,
sure.
it's a free loan.
Yeah.
It costs
Right.
them nothing. It's on the
Sorry
backs
to
of the
keep
people.
interrupting you, Lisa.
No, you're fine.
All of this with zero risk to you.
No,
It's
let's be-
all
let's
the
be
backs
clear.
of the
risk
people.
They'll have a
the
few
people who
payments to
buy
make
the houses
as
on
the infrastructure is getting developed, but, you know, once they build a certain number of homes,
They're structuring these so that there are no payments until they expect the cash flow to come.
So they
oh, that's even better.
The ones that we've heard about, there's 4, 5, 6 years at the front end.
There's a few
Moving right up for
moving
you.
forward right now in the state.
And they're willing to do it because they have a guaranteed cash flow
Well,
based on all that.
yeah, the bonding companies and so forth, they have property taxes as
The
their
best-
security.
The best collateral is taxing.
Okay, we're giving them the taxing authority so they can do that.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you said, all we hear constantly is housing affordability. Oh, do you think I could afford my house with
Wow.
double taxation on it?
Okay,
For heaven's sake.
now, once they've done the bond, the district can then go out and build the infrastructure. If the district does it themselves, or the developer or whoever's there, all they need is one engineer to give them a review that says that their costs are reasonable and they can go and build the
Who
project.
can pick the engineer?
The district
I'm just
picks
checking.
the engineer.
But now who runs the?
We have no authority at that point. Now, the only way we have any authority on the board once it's created is if we own land within the district. Okay? Wow. Now, all of the infrastructure that's created by a PID has to be improvements that can be deeded to the city. Okay? If it's not a city asset, when you're done, it's not public infrastructure, you can't build it with this. And so we will end up with the property, whatever infrastructure they do. It will become ours, along with any maintenance or
That would-
whatever.
And that's long-term cost, but it would still have to adhere to all of our engineering standards,
Right.
et cetera.
That's the one thing that they do have to do. They have to,
So at least we don't get left with.
they don't have to get our permission to build this
Well,
particular road, but they have to
Who's
build it to our
engineering?
standards.
So that's good. But they can pad the upper end of it as much as they want. They could
But
say,
still,
well,
it's
this is gonna cost us
It's
this much
simply-
money.
It's simply a way
because-
to
Yeah.
finance.
So there's
Get
no,
money
there's no
up front.
control on
They
They
that.
don't
need an
They have no
engineer to
risk
give them a reasonable
What if it's an
estimate on
unannexed
the
property right now?
And there's no control on that.
Unincorporated property that gets one of these.
No,
Then
But-
who oversees the engineering inspections?
And we've had those issues already, right?
the other side of this and the argument for making it affordable housing is that there will be no impact fees collected in a PID.
Just,
Okay.
Alan, if I can interrupt, you and I did a little math on this. If at the maximum tax rate on an average priced home that we were talking about, the total interest or the total taxes that they would collect over the 40 years would be 10 times what an average impact fee would be.
So the question is, why would they wanna do this? Well, it's a risk-free loan, you get all the money up front.
Yep.
They have no risk whatsoever.
The developer's only risk will be their land.
When I
Yeah.
talk
So
about,
they sell it off to, I would say, this is my definition, unwitting purchasers who are then on the hook for the cost. The conversations that I've been privy to regarding impact fees is I'm gonna really squirrel into like an economic discussion now. From a professional standpoint, we're at kind of the top end of this economic cycle. Everything's at the highest. Whenever things are at the highest, like that's the wrong time to buy, right? And it could continue to go on for a while. 899, 2000, we ran 2.5 years beyond what should have been the peak of the market cycle, et cetera. So we're in that territory. And the discussions I've been referred to with impact fees is basically that and I won't pick on local builders, it's national home builders, stock-oriented companies. They're at their maximum profit level. That's why they've been pushing density, they get a certain profit per unit. They've reached like the maximum of what they can do with all that. Only place left to squeeze out profit is impact fees. So if they can keep a home price, say at 300,000, right now that includes 20,000 of impact fees, right? Well, if they can shoulder that impact fee onto the PID, right? They're still gonna sell the house for 300,000 and they pocket the difference. That's their only way to squeeze out more profit.
And as we've been talking about tonight, impact fees do not typically cover all of the costs of the infrastructure.
But the bids.
This
And now they will.
would, plus an administration fee.
On the back, so.
On the backs of the people that are gonna own
Residents
homes.
that's moving in and
The
so on.
unknowing homeowners
Sorry,
probably.
yeah.
No, you're
They
fine.
go to close it,
Yeah.
they wouldn't see it.
Like that's what this is.
You know, I guess if you think that a developer sells based on their cost versus the market, then you would be passing this on the.
Well, of course, they only sell based on their cost, right?
Okay.
It's a fixed margin.
Yeah, this is Russia. That's what we do.
And like I mentioned, the district is required to file an annual report with the city, but the bill does not
For
say what that has to include. Or what we can do about it if we don't like it, because there's really nothing.
I could see that we'd be having this conversation as upcoming legislation that we should be
Yes.
concerned about, but legislation that is in place, this is
This
It's
is in
crazy.
place.
crazy to me that this got
Now,
passed.
we are told that this started in Colorado, Utah's the second state with it. We were told by a bonding company, well, secondhand through a bonding company last week, that there's 2,000 of them in Colorado now.
Well, bonding companies love them.
They do, because now you're
Yeah.
getting a bond,
Risk-free loan.
you're getting a bond for every district, where before the city might be doing one every 3 or 4
That's easy money
years.
for a bonding
Yeah.
company.
And the no payment for 6 years just makes the interest that much higher.
Yeah.
Which makes the property taxes that much more.
From an investment point of view, there's demand to put money somewhere to squeeze out a couple basis points.
Okay. Now,
Your yield's higher.
every one of these districts are also gonna be bound by the state's budget and audit rules. So they're probably gonna have annual audits for each one of these as well, to make sure they're meeting state code, but, it's fairly loose for a district.
Boy, if you thought the last housing crash was bad, let's fast forward 10 years with a bunch of these in place.
Yep.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
Okay.
how could you possibly
never
make
climb
your
out of it.
payments? No.
And the last item there, it was answered earlier, this is not a bond that's the city's. It won't be on our financial statements, we're not responsible for it,
It's okay.
it's the property owners.
Yeah, but
Okay.
I think that you're just gonna end up having places that, like you said, are a bunch of vacant homes right there because nobody can afford to buy them at some point.
So, like council know, we've had developers approach us about this, and, their staff has pushed back. We don't think, we're saying it's not a good fit for residential at all. Cause new residents coming in, thinking they're getting their first home, trying to scrimp up money. We blindside, they'll last about 5 years with these type of property taxes, then they'll lose their home.
I say, these are so complex, it could take us years to
Right,
get the
so
rules right. to
I
make
will
this
say
happen.
this, me and Alan had a lot of discussion about this, we're both in the same space, we have our own name for it. We won't say that on the public record, but anyways, a place they may work if you have a single property owner, like a big commercial site, there's a possibility, cause then they know what's happening with eyes wide open. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, a single occupant,
Pretty much a
On the
single
land.
landowner that's not residential at all.
I understand.
A commercial project.
Right, because then they're setting their
Bankrupt.
own tax rate to pay for it, I get it.
Exactly.
Right, eyes wide open.
And we feel like if they know, then we could probably bring a council that option, cause people are trying to get creative on how they fund their projects. Residential, I just can't
Because
imagine
we're
when
at the end of the.
you build
economic
2,000 and
cycle.
3,000 homes, all of a sudden they hit all the same time about this big tax increase. I don't know who in here can double their tax today and afford to pay somewhere.
You know, I look at it and go, okay, so you got 10 of these little pods of this higher tax rate around the state, the city. And we get 5 years down the road and we're saying, the city needs a 10% tax increase to carry ourselves.
Yep.
You're gonna have all these people that are already double up in arms. You're gonna have a hard time getting past that to do what you need to do for the city.
Yeah, and especially if we're on the hook for O&M on these roads and stuff
Yeah,
too.
it-
Now
the
they're
worst,
city
the
roads.
worst case scenario says, I mean, like when
Right.
that crash happens, it's not if, it's when. The worst case scenario will be that then Big Brother government says, okay, we're gonna equalize taxes for everyone. Everyone gets to pay the higher average rate, because it's not fair to shoulder it on just.
Or, imagine this, you already have the higher tax rate, and then something like Olympia Hills works out an annexation with our city. We have to provide services for
Yeah, we're stuck with this.
6,300 homes with no retail businesses to generate the revenue to pay for it. So we will have to increase taxes. I mean, it's just a recipe for tax to where, you know, again, I made the point, the affordable homes that we're talking about out here will be the least affordable homes that you could possibly create.
I'm sorry to digress again, but the initial results of the Southwest study are that the average living cost in the Southwest is higher than the rest of the valley.
Yeah.
Transportation costs, yeah.
As it is.
Right.
Huge, yeah.
So, thank you, Alan, this is very enlightening, especially as we continue having those discussions, coming up with our legislators, Southwest, Olympia Hills, et cetera.
And sorry,
No,
we have to understand the policy implications of it's not just, and so it just unleashes a whole torrent of questions and thoughts and scenarios, none of which seem very pleasant on the surface.
well,
Yeah,
this,
but all
this
of
whole
it-
thing is designed to try and get infrastructure finance. You know, it's a,
But it's ripe for,
I can
But
see
all
the
that
allure in it,
torrent-
but it's
Yeah.
rough for.
Yeah, all that torrent of
and
thoughts.
there's no
I would have
municipal
thought,
oversight, no civic oversight at all.
wouldn't that torrent of thoughts been discussed on the Hill too? I mean, wouldn't you have asked those
the whole thing, you know,
concerns to me?
is trying to allow the infrastructure to be built without it showing up on our financial statements. Because as we evaluate our financial statements, we're looking at it saying, we've got this much debt. We can't go out for more bond unless we have certain things. Well, they're saying, we can allow the developer to go out for the bond. You're not responsible for it. We'll put it all on the homeowners, and that's the solution.
Who don't have a say, won't understand it.
No, they don't. In most cases, this will be completely handled clear to the point of building the infrastructure, the taxing, the bond, the infrastructure, all while the developer is the only
This is-
person.
this is-
Instead of build as they go, they'll build out all the roads and the sewer and gutter,
This
everything,
is
it'll all be
kicking
done with no
Can
houses
down
on
the road, this is kicking the nuclear bomb down
Right,
the
yeah.
road. It's like,
Yeah, it's,
when it blows up, it's gonna blow big. My
It's
gosh.
gonna be a big deal, and, you know, hopefully, people who get into these know what the cost is gonna be, but, you know, you're signing a stack of documents, who knows what's there, so, you know, it's,
Well, plus usually new homes, you just look around the area and try to understand what their average tax is, right? You can't look and see what they've been paying. This is a new home, so there's no history on it.
right, and your taxes go up the year after you buy, right?
but when you go to sell it, you're gonna be selling at a discount price, because
Yeah,
Taxes.
people are gonna be able to see what you've done.
because they gotta
There's no
incorporate the
payments on
taxes
bond
into their
due
account.
for the
Yeah.
first 5-10 years, they'll have no idea what they got into
Yeah.
until it's way too late.
Okay,
Is there any language about, can that rate be adjusted?
the
Once it's set.
board can adjust it, but you've gotta have enough tax rate to cover whatever debt you've already incurred.
Which you said could exceed the 15
Yeah,
mil
it can
if they
exceed
needed to
if
be
the
more
debt
than
is
that.
higher.
Alan, did you, I'm wondering, that's not close enough, but that board or that district can vote to go out for more money.
The board can do whatever they want once it's
So
created.
if they say 20 million is the first bond they go after 40 the next time.
And so they'll never be able to vote to undo it below what is necessary to service the bond.
Right.
Gosh.
Alright, next.
So, the next one, I just wanna go over this real quick, but, we talked last week and last time, and there was some discussion about RDAs, CDAs, RB.
CRAs.
I spelled that wrong, that should be redevelopment agency. They're all different names for the same thing, and every time there's a little tweak to the bill, the legislature renames it something different, okay? When we created our agency here, it was a redevelopment agency, so our overall agency is a redevelopment agency. Since then, we have created we're in the process of creating 4 districts. A couple of them are CDAs, there's a couple of them that are CRAs. And the way it's structured in the city is the RDA is kind of the board you're on that oversees all of these lower areas, okay? So we have the town center CDA, we've got the business park CDA, we've got the Anthem redevelopment agency or area, and we're in the process of the innovative district redevelopment agency.
That's the whole thing.
So they've just, if there's any change in the law, they change the name. It's kind of like going back and looking at the special improvement districts, and then it was special assessment areas, and they all mean the same thing, just tweaks to the law, okay?
So we have one agency and then
Yeah.
districts.
So, right, everything we have falls under our Herriman City Redevelopment Agency. All of these others are subsets of that. So that's why we only have one meeting regarding this. We don't have one for each one of these. All of them are under the heading of our Herriman Redevelopment Agency. When we do our annual report, we've got all 4 of them within the annual report. When a CDA is to be created, it goes to we use a consultant to go through and develop the plan for the CDA, a projected plan. And, the project plan is generally 20 years, and it's set up so that we can get tax money to pay for infrastructure. Okay? Generally, when you go through these plans are usually about 20 years. And so we have the consultant goes through and calculates what they expect to be increases in tax value over the 20 years based on the construction you propose to be built, okay? And it designates who the developer is going to be. It designates how much percentage of the taxes you're gonna get from the other agencies and so forth. With this plan, you go to the other agencies and ask them to participate. How much are you willing to participate in this project? Once we get an agreement from all the taxing entities, we enter an interlocal agreement that sets the terms of how much we get, what we can do with it, and so forth. Okay, how long it lasts. And in most of them, it also says when we trigger this with the county, so that's the year that we actually start receiving the tax money, okay?
And it's 20 years from the time we trigger it,
It's
right?
usually 20 years.
Yeah.
Some of the older ones in our cities are older than that,
Yeah.
30 years, but
It's
typically
usually
they wanna go
20 years.
15 and 20 years now.
Now, when we get into a specific, you'll see that might be different. Okay, so once the interlocals are all in place and we're ready for the CDA to operate, we file the interlocals with the county clerk, which gives them instruction of when to start giving us the money, how much to give us, and how long it lasts. Okay?
if they can, just for
Yeah, go ahead.
clarity's sake for anybody that's watching, I know this is tax increment fund. So
It's tax increments.
what those agencies are agreeing to give us is the difference between what the land value was, the taxes associated with the land before development, and
Right.
after we get to keep whatever portion they agree to of that difference for that period of time.
That's right. It's the percentage of the increase, so if you've got a farm
Which
field
doesn't
there,
affect the tax rate,
no, it's not affecting the tax rate. This is,
completely different.
say you've got a farm and it's at real low taxes and you're projecting, you know, some big development of retail and offices and so forth, and you're gonna get this big change in taxes because of what you're building. All of the other agencies are willing to participate a piece of their money into this so that when you're all done, you're all getting a bigger share.
Because if that happens,
Right.
then they'll get a
More
higher,
tax revenue,
but if it doesn't happen, they just get what it is now.
Well, once the city has done all of this and approves it, then construction can begin on the infrastructure. And, all of the agreements that we've got, require the city and the RDA to say, go ahead and build this, okay? So, and then the developer submits for reimbursement of costs, or as what happens in a lot of agencies, they go out and bond based on the TIF that's gonna come in, then contract to have the work done. In this case, or in all of our cases at this point, the developers have put the money up front, so they're getting reimbursements as it comes, okay? So that's how CDA works. Now, we had this discussion about the Herriman Business Park. We'll just go over that real quickly, but I've done a lot of research on this since the last meeting, because I came to the last meeting expecting that my presentation would address whether or not we could afford a parking structure from this. I was asked a lot more questions than that, and some of the things I've had to research since then, and so I've done a lot of research on this. But there's several things to keep in mind as we go through this. This plan for the business park was created in 2014. It's been revised in 2016 and 2017. Now, the 2017 revision was because, actually the 2016 revision was to change the plan to allow us to be reimbursed for the land used on RSL.
The 6 million.
Prior to that, the plan did not allow us to spend any of this money on land. So when we donated the money to RSL with the agreement we would get it back from the CDA, we had to go and amend the plan so that we were able to do that. In 2017, so we've made little tweaks in 16 and 17. In 2017, when the RSL facility was purchased, the council agreed to waive $669,000 of impact fees. There is an agreement with Wasatch that allows us to take any reimbursement they get from TIF to reimburse us for the impact fees. So that money is supposed to come to us. Now, both of these, the 6 million land and the 69,000 in impact fees, as I understand from John, is that he didn't feel comfortable us just giving someone this cash. So we needed a mechanism to get it back, because we're not really in a position to give things to private businesses. So these two things were put in the plan for us to get it back. Now, the original plan shows that we're gonna get $42.9 million in TIF from this project. Now, and I missed this when I talked to you last time, but we have already given up 3.27 million of that by withdrawing from Slovisa. Slovisa was going to contribute $3.2 million to this TIF. When we withdrew, we had the option of going back and saying, okay, we want HCC to take their place, but we didn't do that. So we've dropped that $3.27 million out of the equation. I wanna kinda skip over the costs so far because I can't confirm the numbers at this point, but I believe we're in the range of $30 million. It's already been put into the water systems and the roads and so forth, but we were supposed to have the documentation on this 2 weeks ago on Friday. It has not showed up yet, but we're supposed to have that for a long time now. I can't confirm the cost, so I wanna skip over that fairly easily at this point.
Just rest assured, council, when we actually get that, we can actually do a reconciliation on those costs. Then we'll come back to council and see if you accept it and able to start writing checks back to you.
Okay, now, just to keep in mind here, this is money that the developer has spent. Every dime that's come in from the TIF is still sitting in a bank account, okay?
Right.
Now, to be clear too, the TIF money is coming to the redevelopment agency and not to the city. This is not city funds. This is redevelopment agency funds. We can't use it for other things, okay? But this was the original budget adjusted for the Slovisa being gone. Disregard that for this point because, you know, like I say, I can't confirm it. But we're looking at getting out of that documentation. Now, there have been costs now at this point by both Rosecrest, who is designated in the plan as the developer, and Wasatch. Now, as was mentioned last time, we should have a participation agreement to divide how that's gonna happen. Okay, we don't have one. But I think at this point, it's important to note that in the plan, Rosecrest is designated as the initial developer. Okay,
And we don't have any documentation otherwise, like any documentation of agreements with Rosecrest and
No.
Wasatch or anything like that, right?
okay. I guess I would have to ask Blake or Gordon for that answer because I'm not involved in that area.
I think we have one, but
There's a plan.
it's very.
Blake
generic.
would have had to have approved the plan.
So it just names out. That's fine.
Okay.
It has these same numbers in it.
Now, there is some infrastructure
But
in
it's just
this.
an agreement that says,
Rosecrest will get paid back based on their actual costs.
we'll get paid back for our 6 million and
No, that's with Wasatch. This is just with
That's a
Rosecrest.
separate agreement.
So this just basically says, if you build it, we'll pay you for it.
Now, in the plan, and I'll say this before I go on, it does allow for another property owner to become a beneficiary of the plan if they contribute to the infrastructure. So again, that would have to be approved by the city, but that's where you become conflicted, is if there's two parties and you don't have a participation agreement, okay?
Even get back, and you remember, you get paid back our, part of that TIF is all the property valuation of those structures down there.
Yeah.
So if that gets lessened, it's gonna change how much it's coming back.
So I don't wanna jump ahead
Go ahead.
necessarily, but I've got a question of, cause you made this point a couple of times about they're the ones listed as the prior developer. Does that legally weaken the city's ability to be repaid for their 6 million?
No,
Does
I
that
think,
set up-
I think there's enough money to pay the city back at 6 million.
Okay, got it, but I wanna make sure we're not on shaky ground if we set a priority for something over something
Could
else.
we be sued? We
I
could
mean,
always be
that's
sued.
what I'm trying to
It's still
figure
be your
out.
decision.
Well,
It's,
yeah, it
it's
is
the
your
RDA
decision.
is empowered to make that
I think
decision, is
we've
that true?
got- I think we've got some moral obligation in
Sure,
that the
right.
city has authorized them to go ahead and do the work. When we met with Mike Bradshaw, the Monday before our last meeting, he says, as long as I get some every year and can show the board of directors, I don't mind splitting it with everyone else, okay? That was what he said. Now, whether his board approves that or not, but that was the point he made in our meeting. Now, from what I understand, they have provided us a participation agreement that they would like, and we've got to decide whether we like it or not. I'm not on
But
that,
the
so.
plan also, as you said, calls out that if another property owner, so Rosecrest is sold property to Wasatch, if they build infrastructure, that they're eligible for the same repayment Rosecrest is.
Yeah, well, whatever they pay, yes.
Right, well, that's what I mean.
Right.
That's to me the same,
Yeah.
as what it says is,
They
if they build infrastructure, they're eligible for repayment, just
Yeah,
like Rosecrest.
they are,
Equally
they're
as
all,
Rosecrest,
they're all, now, how you divide it up or how that's done,
That's where the legal question.
that's a
Yeah,
legal
that's what I'm
question.
wondering, right.
And that's just,
So-
that would be an argument either
Okay,
way.
either way, so, okay,
You have impact fees coming in off those too, so you've got a little backstop to it.
Okay, that's important to understand, yeah.
now, question was asked about impact fees, and there are some of the things down there being paid with impact fees. We don't know how much that's gonna be yet for that little piece, it's not a great deal, because, you know, a big chunk of the CDA is the Salt Lake Community College and the soccer stadium. I'm estimating from the maps I was looking at, there's probably 80 acres altogether there that's gonna have something built on it. So impact fees coming from that particular area are not going to carry very far. Now, part of the water system coming in there, we do have a separate, impact fee reimbursement, which goes to a greater area. So there's a portion of it that will come from that, but we're still, I'll get into some of the problems with that as we go forward. Okay, no impact fees have been sent so far. This is exactly what we've collected. It's still sitting in our bank. If you look in our budget, you look in our financial statements, we're reporting those as no payments at this point.
And any of the impact fees are these $669 that we waived,
What's that?
and this $669,000 impact fees that we would have collected, we waived,
Yes.
right?
Well, it does show, this is excess revenue over expenditures though, so I guess it's not.
Yeah. The only thing that we've paid out of any of the CDAs is that we do have 2 loans on the Herriman Town Center, and so the TIF has been paying the loans. Not giving anything back to the developers at this point. We're paying the loan. Now, last year, 2019 fiscal year was the first year that we've actually got enough TIF to completely pay the loan. Prior to that, the developer was making up the difference. So, because it's a little different here, because we also have an SAA, a CDA, we've got 2 bonds on it, so there's multiple hands out for the money at this point, so, okay? Now, to complete the infrastructure that was put in the original plan, we need between 6.8 and 8.8 million more dollars. Okay? So in addition to what's already paid, we believe that's our best estimate of what it's gonna cost to finish doing the infrastructure that's there. Now, this is a question that John and I have talked about today, but I found in the paperwork today that Salt Lake County has a benchmark in their interlocal that says if we don't meet certain benchmarks, we lose half of our money that they would initially give us. And one of those benchmarks is that we put this whole $65 million worth of infrastructure in. It doesn't say what if it costs less than $65 million.
They said
So-
you gotta spend 65.
So in addition to the 40 we think we're gonna spend, contract also would require us, as I read it, to put another 25 million in.
So it's basically a condition from the county to make us put some skin in the
Yeah.
game, right?
All this can.
Well, the 60, so if
So we get 40 from the.
42.9
Yeah.
from the TIF, from the tax increment, well then the difference between that and the 65 is.
Understood.
And I think actually we might get close to that when we look at the impact reimbursements and the TIF and and whatever, we might get somewhat closer to that. Whether the county is gonna hold us to this or not, I don't know, okay?
And also, that's the number we put in the budget that we said we would spend.
Yes, it is.
So
So
if it's
they put
anybody's
in
fault,
there
it's ours.
that we will spend what we said we would spend.
Right.
Okay, now there's a couple other things I just wanna point out here. You know, there's been some discussion about the construction's going to be higher dollar construction than what is originally calculated. That will not change what we get in TIF, because the county has put a maximum on theirs that says we won't get more than $10 million. The school district has put a cap that says we won't get more than $20 million. The fire district has put that we won't get more than $6 million. So we've essentially got 36 million of the 40 that is capped. It's not gonna go up based on bigger construction. We're gonna be where we're gonna be, okay? It's not gonna go up,
That's pretty normal.
yeah, okay? All of the interlocals required us to trigger this and start our 20 years going in either the calendar year 2018 or calendar year 2019. We had no choice to do it other than one of those 2 years.
What was?
It was done in 2018.
What determined it to be 18 or 19? Like,
Well,
we just
I-
decided that?
I believe it had to do with getting on board with the soccer stadium, but I can't tell you that for sure.
Right.
Okay, but that's when we did, okay? So, we're limited to what we're doing. We've gotta put all of the infrastructure in that we said we would put in, and maybe, but let me just show you, we're not. All right. This is the map that we put in with the original, Herriman Business Center plan, 2014. Okay. Most of these red lines have already been put in, the water tanks, the road going down the middle, okay? Most of that's been put in. Now, Rosecrest has agreed to mostly put in this road right here, which is Real Drive, it's Juniper Crest coming from the other side. It's 2 lanes right now, it really ends full construction about right here. It's supposed to go to 4 lanes, is it, Gordon?
It's my favorite road, isn't it?
5, okay? So that road's gotta be put in. This is a storm drain that still needs to be put in. And this is the storm drain that runs up into Riverton that we've had a lot of discussion about. That storm drain is anticipated to be built by this CDA. Okay?
That's part of the 6.8 to 8.8 million, right?
Yeah. Okay, now, here's some things. Rosecrest has agreed to build this road, with some exceptions. Now, what we decide to do with reimbursement agreements may change their idea, whether they wanna do that or not. They have not agreed to put the intersection in Mountain View corridor, which will require lights, and that's $1.4 million to do that intersection. They've also not agreed to do this intersection right here, which is about $400,000. And the reason they don't wanna do that is because this is Wasatch coming back and saying, we want the intersection different than what's there.
Okay.
Gonna take a lot of change, they've refused to do that.
Okay.
They're saying, if you guys want it, you do it yourself. Okay? Now, they don't wanna do these 2 storm drains either, but it is anticipated that there will be funds available through this CDA to do that at some point.
Whether they do it or someone.
Whether they do it or someone else, or we do it and repay ourselves, or whatever. Now, the city has also put $700,000 in our regular funds budgeted for that this last year. There's $700,000 of whatever that's gonna cost.
Okay.
Now, we'll have to look at how we can do that. If the developers don't wanna do it, somehow, and I didn't mention this, but that putting all that infrastructure in has to happen by the 7th year.
By the 7th.
7th year. So 2025, all of this infrastructure has to be in, or else we lose half the county's money. Okay? Okay,
Infrastructure.
so everything that's in this plan has to be in place. And whether or not we have to have the full 65 or just the things that are on the map, that's a question. Hopefully the county won't even worry about that if we have everything in.
We're so frugal, we're glad
Yeah, okay. So,
It's alright,
that's
and
the,
I'm gonna
that's,
make you say that again now that Steve's back,
okay. All right,
the 2025.
2025 is when all of the infrastructure has to be in or we lose half the county's money. Now, another benchmark that's in the counties is that we have to,
Stormwater, that's part of it.
the stormwater is part of the plan and this stormwater. So, we either need to build those and reimburse ourselves from the TIF, or we need to, the TIF, the CDA is gonna have to somehow finance it, or we get a contractor to pay it up front with reimbursement, or however we're
So
gonna do
just the
that.
things on this map have to be built, or the whole 65?
Well, that's the
That's
question. The county says it has to be 65 million. But we are building
I need to start
everything.
a construction company really fast.
Yeah,
Right.
Charge
okay.
double.
Now,
Because it's a government contract that requires
It's
that
the-
it be
information.
it's the thought in my mind, and I don't know, John can speak for himself, but I think if everything on the map's in, they're probably not gonna have a problem with it.
Yeah.
There are a couple other benchmarks.
That's what we really have to make sure.
One of the benchmarks that we have to hit is we have to have $103 million worth of taxable construction. Okay? We started with this CDA, there was 368,000 of taxable, property. We are right now, depending on what happens with the value, the taxable value of the soccer stadium, we're at about 50 million right now.
Well,
Okay.
we gotta come up with another 53 million.
Yeah, we've gotta build some more to get there
By
by
2025?
2025. All the benchmarks have to be hit by the 7th year, which would be 2025. Okay?
So I've got 2 benchmarks written down, what am I
Yeah.
missing?
Now,
All infrastructure by 2025 must have 103 million in taxable property by 2025, what else?
the only other benchmark they have is that we have to dedicate the right-of-way to the county for the trax line.
Which is along Sentinel Ridge already on the east side, look at that wide
But there,
right of way,
it is a clause in the interlocal that we will dedicate that to the county.
which we will figure out, should go to them, or should go to UTA, or should be another mass transit.
Okay.
Cause
That's
county's not mass transit.
The others don't set benchmarks, but they do set caps, okay? So we're really limited to the total of the 42 minus the 3 of Slavisa. Now, just to point out too, and this is not assuming you're going to do, but if you withdraw from any other districts, you decide to go for another district, it will drop this here unless we form a new district and enter it into this compact, so, okay?
So, let me just clarify this, before the RSL tax adjustment was like 80-something million, wasn't that right?
Yeah, it was 80 something, and so, but not, the entire RSL, just to be clear, is not in the district. There's a big chunk of it, but it's not all.
So,
Okay.
It's,
So,
what, 60% or 40% or something like that, I got it.
Alan,
yes,
I know what you're thinking about, that we have these benchmarks, we have to hit by 2024, end of 2024, or half the county money goes away. If the TIF goes away, the developer doesn't get.
if the TIF goes away, the developers who've already put money in
They're
are
at
the
risk.
ones that
They
don't
just
get
lose it.
reimbursed.
So
Which
we
is
lose
sad.
half the TIF or 100% of it?
On the county, we lose half. It drops in half if we don't hit the benchmarks by 2025.
Which kind of goes back to our earlier discussion of some of this stuff they would have built anyway in their development. It's just a big part of this to potentially get.
That incentivizes the developer to move faster the project and get the
Yeah,
stuff built so it's
makes
taxable value. But it has
Yeah.
slowed down because of now there are landowners involved with that and
So,
have to understand how that's working. But
There's other-
there's risk to developers and not getting paid as a
Other water tank issues are slowing down some development too, right?
Yeah, just not on.
The next tank. There's water tank supply for that.
Right, but there's new tanks to facilitate
That's
further.
part of the
Upper piece.
existing 30 million that's supposed to be built.
So the water.
The
tanks-
new water tanks are
no.
part of that 30
Oh,
million?
No,
sorry.
they're,
No,
that,
no.
these are already in, that's servicing this.
Yeah.
Totally understood, but we have to build new water tanks, they're not a part of this necessarily, right?
no.
But they are, they facilitating further development here, right?
They won't really, just the
But
stuff
we-
above Mount.
Above that.
Those three little shaded parcels above Mountain View corridor, or uphill to Mountain View corridor, are what gets serviced by the new tanks.
Everything below Mountain View.
These three, oh, the other
Those
ones are,
three on.
oh, I got it, I understand.
Yeah, just as a point of clarification too, you know, the developer's been really slow getting this information. We have an estimate from him that is plus or minus $2 million or $5 million, depending which day you ask him, but, you know, they're estimates. So I can't speak to the estimates. We've been trying for a long time to get their estimates, but the problem is, there hasn't been any money, so they haven't worried about it.
Right.
Okay, we're just now getting the money, so now they're starting to want a participation agreement, they're wanting to give us the information, so we haven't had it. Now, as to why, you know, as we look at this, I don't still have real good information to say, okay, we can or we can't do something, you know,
Right.
because I don't have the full cost. And, you know, their estimate, which is a pretty wide range, only came to us maybe 4 weeks ago. So we haven't had information to even say we could move forward with something, you know?
Right.
But I think as we go forward, there's some things particularly, we need to make sure that there's participation agreements up front with everyone who's putting anything into a project.
Agreed.
You know, so, we need to have that. We need to make sure, I believe, and John can again, reinforce this or not, but we put the $6 million of land and the impact fee reimbursement to come back to us to make sure that we were on solid legal ground. So I think those are things that, you know, if we wanna get it back from them and then somehow you wanna loan it back to them or whatever, you know, that's totally up to the council, but it needs to come back to the city. So, we need to do that.
The thing I think about the $6 million of the cities too, is that's the taxpayers' money, and they have no way to build a house up there, recoup it, or
No.
rebuild a building. There's no way for them to recoup it so in my mind, that's why it takes first priority, is because
Right,
at least a developer, he has a way to continue to make money in that area, but the taxpayers don't, so I feel like they should be reimbursed.
I agree with you. Okay,
Very good point.
this is a minor thing, but the plan does call for level parking, so if there's some way that we structure this parking structure where some of it can come out of here, I believe the plan needs to be amended, because it calls for level parking, doesn't call for.
Gravel.
Yeah.
It calls
Yeah,
for gravel.
it was never in the original
No.
that was presented.
So, okay, I had in here originally that we needed to stop the development down there if we were gonna divert any money to the parking structure. But learning what I did about needing to put all of this in to preserve our money, we'll take that recommendation out. But, so, I guess that's what I have. If you have any additional questions, you know, I don't wanna seem that I'm opposed to the parking garage, cause I'm not, but I'm just thinking this is not the way that we can do it.
And before everything started happening, we thought there might be a possibility of amending that agreement to a lot of the parking structure. So we thought there was gonna be a little bit of excess there. And the county would, I think, would be supportive of doing that because they like these type of things.
Right.
But we don't feel comfortable yet until we find out the actuals and figure out what the process is gonna be, who we're gonna reimburse first.
Right, but, I mean, it's deviated substantially from the original plan.
But we
I mean,
also
we've
knew
got-
there would never be enough money to pay for it, totally.
Yeah, but I mean, now we've got this Levisa money gone, we've got, you know, the tax base is being reduced, tax base is being reduced, so there's less revenue being created there. And potentially, we're 4 years away from having half of the county's TIF money going in too, which would reduce it even further. I mean,
Well, in the 6
we went
million,
from 40-ish million to 20-ish million, you know, I mean.
and the 6 million for the land and the 700,000 for the impact fees have been something that's happened after the fact as well.
Yeah.
Those were not
And those
anticipated
reimbursements back
by
to the city.
original plan.
So you figure that priority.
Right.
So,
You know, 6.7 million, which I think has to be.
Thank you, Alan. I'll say that explanation helps a lot. I think my frustration, your frustration is that there's a lot of these things that we should have known a lot sooner. We should have a lot of these discussions ongoing, especially as talking about one other things. So it's
But
good
you know,
to have
as
this
you
now
know,
and go forward.
Well,
This has been over a lot of years, and some have been involved in that, some of you haven't. And so as we have, it's almost like every election cycle, we have to go through everything, because there's so much out there.
In 4 years, I've not had any of this.
Well, this 2017
The
was.
6 million for the land, we understood, we were basically told, yeah, this will help this get done and the city will get paid back.
Freeman signed
That
that
was
was
it.
a thing in 2016, so.
you know, I think there's a conversation we've kind of been having, and maybe an agenda item for another work meeting, but the importance of understanding the financial impacts of a lot of these decisions and these agreements and stuff, understanding, you know, how it impacts the budget, how it impacts city finances, I think is a really important consideration, and I think is not made a priority, it hasn't been made a priority in previous council decisions, and understanding things, you know, investing money for a parking garage to build a commercial has some attractiveness and there's some benefits to that, but I think it would be important for us to understand, okay, if we invest in that and it creates so much commercial, how much will the city expect to be repaid over how much time, and is that a good investment of $14 million of the city's money based on the time horizons and the potential for repayment, you know?
the whole 50 acres would go into retail based on the averages that we've seen.
Right.
It would generate just under $10 million in 20 years in sales tax to the city.
20 years to generate
10.
10 million. Oof. See,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem,
You'd get a
That
little
sounded
more
nice.
from the room tax if it was a hotel. But you know, I did a calculation, we have a 100-room hotel, and they,
but even if it's 14 million over 20 years, that's still not an adequate time value of money
and
for,
that's, you know,
that
that's
could
what
triple
we're
3
seeing
times
now.
in 20 years.
I haven't seen anything from the developer that shows his projections of sales tax. I'm using the averages that we got from our consultant to look at that. I don't know what they plan on doing for sales tax. But you know, a hotel would generate a little bit more, but you know, if you just take a 100-room hotel that charges $100 a night, and it's, full occupancy every night, it would generate around $100,000 a year in room tax, so we could get that on top of that. But that's about what we would be looking
Another
at.
$2 million.
Yeah,
over 20
maybe
years,
2
right?
million, so, you know, that's what we would be looking at in sales tax from 50 acres.
Right, and so I appreciate that analysis because I think that puts into perspective the fiscal impact of these decisions, right? There's also a trade-off in, if it's not done, then you get 25 acres maybe instead of 50 acres and you generate less money, but then you're not worried about getting the 15 million paid back or 14
I
million.
guess it seems to me like if they built 25 acres of commercial, put 25 acres of parking lot, at some point when there's demand, they could build a parking structure in that parking lot and then build the rest of their buildings if they wanted to. That seems logical to me.
if the demand's high enough, there's more revenue opportunity there, yeah.
So this is definitely a future council meeting, but I'm hearing tons of numbers floating around out here today, and I'm having issues with some of these numbers. It's like, we're $9 million a year right now on one-time money. So if we're not generating it on sales tax, where are we gonna replace the
Well,
money?
we do have to generate sales tax.
But the figures I'm hearing tonight is it doesn't matter, cause even I went back to what you were saying with, you said that it would be, basically, it would be better to put a whole bunch of residents over there versus commercial, cause we're gonna get $520,000 a year for residential
Okay,
taxes
now,
versus $129,000.
You gotta take that into context though. You're putting a few acres in commercial over there and a whole bunch into residential. So you can't just trade it dollar for dollar. You know, you're talking,
The cost that comes with it.
yeah, there was.
So I was anticipating, cause the way it was master planned, it's 50 acres of commercial.
Now,
I'm
not
not
the
talking about
edge home.
Watson. I'm
Yeah.
talking about the edge home stuff.
okay,
Okay, cause there would have been 50 acres of commercial and
okay.
the numbers was only $129,000 worth of taxes a year, but we'd get 520 for the residential.
Yeah,
and
but there's more residential than there is.
And I was like,
Commercial.
looking at the 20 acres.
Yeah, if you could put the whole thing in
Versus the
commercial,
whole
it's
thing.
gonna be more than the residential.
Well, that's always what I was thought. I'm like,
But-
this isn't, the numbers aren't.
But you're
driving for me.
taking
Outside,
more residential and comparing it to lesser amount of commercial. It's not,
It's not the
Comparatively,
same. To
right.
Steve's point, what we need is what we did with the Adelant thing.
Yeah,
Right? Have a
Because that
full
makes sense
financial
to me,
analysis
right.
that you can compare
Right.
apples and apples and.
right,
well,
numbers.
I've done it from the plan they had in early December for revenue. I don't know what the expenses are gonna be because when you look at it, you know, I've seen several things that say it's gonna be a homeowners association, so that takes the roads out. I don't know what there is for storm drain in that piece.
you can only talk gross revenue, not,
Yeah,
yeah, I understand.
right, so that's
sorry.
what I've got so far. If I have
Cause
more information, I can give you more information.
that's what I've always run off that basis and then some of the numbers, I was like, this isn't making any sense to me because then why don't we just build homes everywhere and forget the commercial if it's
Well,
gonna be
you
that
know,
way?
when you look at the numbers, commercial that's not retail does not generate as much as residential does. However, you're going to end up in most cases with more expense for the residents than you've got for the.
Right.
Right.
for the
Which is again,
commercial.
Right,
my idea of a balanced community, right?
Right.
Have those places
Right.
that do produce some income,
But
but don't suck up as much services to balance out.
right.
I'm trying to figure this out is that, so 50 acres all developed as retail commercial would generate around $500,000 a year in
Yeah.
gross tax revenue, right? Okay, so we have,
And that's just point of sale.
Yeah.
That's not including franchise tax
So that's-
and
right.
everything else.
There's not a lot.
$10,000 an acre of sales tax revenue, is that what you're saying?
It's 23,000 an acre.
Okay,
so
23,000 an
you're
acre, okay,
about
sorry.
10 on 50.
That's just point of sale.
Right. So, I'm trying to figure out,
How we cover the gap?
yeah, even with
Yeah.
500 acres
Because
of
that's not
commercial
the
in
only
the
math.
city.
That's just point of sale. It's not the only math. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. You gotta compare everything.
Yeah, but
There's
we've
a lot
gotta
more to it.
close what? A $15 to $20 million budget issue down the road between,
By
impact and.
preserving commercial, every ounce of it.
Well, no, it's not even close to that much.
Well,
That's what I'm
9
saying,
million
I
right
can't
now.
figure it out,
No.
is,
Well, it depends on how we develop
our-
out. Right now, it's what, 6?
Well, our
No.
permits last year was just over $7 million. Okay, we transferred almost 4 million into capital projects. So for operations, we might have to replace $3 million to $4 million. Now, depending on what you've gotta build in the future, we've gotta build something in for capital projects. And if we lose impact fees, how are we gonna replace that? That's what we gotta look at.
500 acres of retail development in our city would generate $11.5 million of sales tax revenue.
Well,
Just
we
points.
currently,
There's
No,
a lot
there's,
more.
right, I mean, there's property tax and franchise tax and telephone tax.
we're
and
about
all
5
those-
million right now. If we got 11 million, we'd be feeling really good. We would.
I just just wanted to make sure I was clear, because I've always understood that way, residential housing is almost always a cost to a city.
It is.
You cost more to service it than you ever make
Right.
back on the taxes and stuff.
Under our tax structure, that is true.
Okay, that's what I was thought, that's why when I saw this,
But
that
like-
number, I was like, wait, but that didn't offset by the cost to
We're
serve.
going through this progress that in a few years, we're gonna have to replace some of the growth. Hopefully, the sales tax grows at a greater rate than the growth is. Or at some point in the future, we're gonna have to look at a property tax
Property tax
adjustment.
increase.
You know, the city has stayed on the exact same tax rate since 1998.
Right.
Everyone else is increasing, but we're holding steady.
We're substantially less than our neighboring communities in terms of property tax rates, right?
Not
We're
overall.
about the same.
For the amount of money that comes right to Herriman City, yes. So you have to look at all of
As far
things,
as
Yeah.
fire,
tax rate.
police,
Now-
everything.
Riverton chose a few years ago not to take any property taxes for the city. They take zero. They get nothing. They live off of sales tax and they don't have the new growth.
So they get franchise taxes and things like that.
They get franchise tax,
They're much more balanced.
but.
Yeah.
But, you know, the last financial statement I looked at on Riverton was a couple of years ago. They had $1 million in building permits that year. Okay, compared to our almost 8 that year.
Yeah.
We're growing, they're built out, we're trying.
And their
Build
building's
infrastructure.
actually starting to spike up more now than it ever has.
You know, when I look at Herriman City, I have this issue because, you know, you look at the state governor's economic development people, and they're telling us we're growing as a state by 70,000 people a year. 35,000 moving in and 35,000 babies, okay? But we're doing 1,500, 1,700 building permits, and you do 4 people per home. You know, we're up around 8,000 people moving to the city.
10% of the whole state's
More
growth.
than that, 10% of the whole state, and yet we're not getting that same kind of participation from the state to help us with what we're doing.
So an infrastructure number that Mayor Staggs quotes all the time is that the southwest cities account for over 70% of the growth in the county, yet we get roughly 25% of the funds for
Well,
infrastructure.
and when you look at the state, you know, we might get $1 million or $2 million a year, and I see Draper and Sandy getting these multiple $1 million grants from the state.
Yeah, have better connections.
Politics.
Yep.
Back to our earlier.
You know, you go, the I-15 corridor gets the money, and we're getting the growth that we're not getting sustained on.
Yeah. Which makes these conversations more and more difficult. How do we cover those costs?
And they're driving the growth, and yet there's nothing to back it up.
Yeah.
So let's plop down
Okay.
30,000 more people in the cul-de-sac.
Yeah,
back
so I
there.
didn't mean to digress
No,
from
you're
that, but I
okay.
was just like, wait, because that's always how I understood it, but this is just numbers without taking out costs.
But to go back to the parking garage thing, it's different buckets of money too, right? So whatever it costs to build it, 14 million and estimated 10 million, just point of sale, add in all the other revenue with it. Well, you didn't pay for it with sales tax, you paid for it with tax increment, right, is the argument. It's basically money that we're
Sure.
getting from this taxing entities for free to create something that will provide for a long time. So it'll be interesting to see an actual analysis of
Right.
how the numbers.
That's a good point.
Alright,
I think that's, I guess that's the discussion to have is maybe the direction to give, if you guys are on board, is that I think there needs to be a financial analysis with a lot of these decisions that are coming up, because I think we're doing, past councils have made decisions without full consideration of the budget implications.
You know, when you're looking at individual projects, that's fairly easy.
Right.
When you're looking at it across multiple or even across the city, it's pretty hard to do.
Yeah.
But, you know, when we're pulling it by the city, you know, we can see what's going into it and what it's gonna cost. You know, we can, make a better analysis of that than some of the across the channel, so.
Sure.
So I hear what you're saying, Steve, totally agree with it though, but how
how do we do that? We try to do that in-house where you hire consultants. Because,
Well, you got free time,
what's that?
you got free time, just do that.
Well, we know who the Yoda in the room when it comes to financial, and that's Alan, so, but I don't know.
Well, the first thing we've gotta do is figure out these CDAs and participation agreements, et cetera. In regards to the parking structure itself, that analysis needs to be done in regards to what we decide, how to
Yeah, it
structure the
does, right.
CDAs, et cetera. John has mentioned several times that they think it can pay for itself sort of thing. Well, let's, if that's true, then show us a proposal that fits with our analysis.
Yeah, where's the money come from? We're not sure where it's at.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily calling for an outside consultant, maybe appropriate for certain types of things, but I think more importantly, just kind of
I don't know if that's a bad idea though.
educated ballpark, at least on some of the,
I
at
know
least
on something like a
frames
market
it, you know.
structure, would probably be a good idea to have a third
Right.
party look at it, because I don't wanna, Alan spent a lot of time already, as you know. And then he can review those numbers and see if, that review's actually good power too.
Yeah, we have.
What do you think, Alan? What would you?
Alan will always, he's just a worker.
Let's just
Just get it
start
done.
with me doing it, if you decide, we can see how it goes.
Yeah, well, you have to kind of monitor that for us to say, it's taking too much of
I'll
my
tell you this,
time.
every time we lump on another load, you can check it out, but you can come here about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, he's here, and he's here until 10 o'clock at night, so
You can correct me if
that's
I'm
what-
wrong.
that's what
but
happens.
I think
they'll do it, that's.
if I'm sitting in these shoes, my answer to that question is, I'd rather do it because I can trust my numbers. You have an outside consultant do it and you're getting an appraisal.
Yep.
Yep.
Right, it's what do you want this to say?
Right, I completely understand.
Yep. There,
The
I would
parking
agree with
structure,
that very much so.
to be clear, also, as far as we knew there was never money in one bucket to pay for the parking structure reimbursement development one. We talked about, cause state is funding those a little bit, help fund those, and so is quarter preservation funding, the Colin Heights one. That's the things I kept saying, we'll go see what we can do. And that's reality, when you
Get other
attach it
sources,
to a-
county monies, grants.
You attach it to light rail, possibly light rail coming in and parking structure, the state, UTA, everybody starts getting on board and backing that up and support those monies to flow. I believe, I'm not, Gordon, remember, I can't remember if it paid for 100% of Collar Heights, but they paid a lot for it.
What about Quack? Do they have money?
EQUAC,
Yeah, Quack.
never known EQUAC to fund a parking structure for.
I'm just saying,
But
if we're
I know
talking
it,
about
Cause
heat,
we can find out.
heat conduct, all that kind of stuff, environmental control kind of stuff.
Less
Isn't that part of
asphalt,
that?
right?
Yeah, right, it doesn't
Smaller
include
heat sinks,
heat,
right?
whatever.
We applied for it in the CMAQ funds, and Wasatch Front called me and said it wasn't eligible for CMAQ, so we had to push it over into the STIP funding bucket. So now we're competing with all the UDOT UTA projects.
I was just curious, I mean, this
Again, we
just
need
seems
to
like
get some regional.
a sea of asphalt versus a condensed parking structure seems like it would be better as far as to the environment.
Yeah.
The fact that
It is.
that the north and east of the county has gotten all these funded with federal money and county money and state money and continues to, and that we have the burden of all the growth and we don't get a proportionate share, it's just
Goes
crazy.
back to what we were talking about earlier.
Exactly, yeah. Alright, we ready to move on? Yeah?
Oh, yeah, I think so. Thank you, Alan. Awesome.
2.11 discussion regarding Oakdale's development, regarding the position of the city. I believe that's pretty much just to us, how we want. The idea was to have it kind of a joint letter,
Yeah, I think we just need to
a pen to paper, and
Yeah.
you've written one yourself, but it's a good template for us to work from. I mentioned that Southwest mayors, mainly myself and Mayor Staggs, will be presenting some, basically 30 minutes to the county council on the 28th, so we'll have stuff to work from there.
maybe just take that and just put the bullet points, because I only just talked about one bullet point, and I think that if we just condense bullet points onto, you know what I mean, cause I don't know what your guys' rule is, but anything more than a page doesn't get read.
Yeah.
Right, and so
Good rule.
just a introductory, here's
And
our
that's
bullet
really what it
points.
is bullet points, it's kind of what we're preparing and starting with the fact that the surrounding cities have rejected this for a number of reasons. Looking at the revised application, and that's what it is an application for density, it's not a plan. an application, they want more than what's allowed. The cities are required to, correct me if I'm wrong, planners, engineers, we're required to submit our general plan to the county, right? And the county has their general plan based off of our general plans. Well, their general plan says that area is a base density of 3 units per acre with a maximum of 5 if it's master planned. So they're simply asking for more than what's been planned for. We already have issues with
What we've master planned, what they've master planned.
with what we've planned for. They're asking for a lot more than what has been planned for. It's unsustainable, we can go through all the points, but I think that's the crux of it, is that it's beyond anything that's been planned. That, I mean, in order to say yes, it's got to check all these boxes, and it checks none.
And it's not only that, it's extreme in nature, not just because of, you call it 6.8 or 6.9 gross units per acre, and that's the number they wanna talk about. And those numbers are applied usually to smaller developments, 10 acres, 40 acres, something like that. This is 930 acres. This is Stansbury Park, this is a city, right?
And then if you take out, which I think needs to be part of bullet points, yeah.
Right.
If you do consider, so you've gotta take out Utah State, that's not open space, that doesn't relieve the pressure of the density over that area. And they're counting it as open
half.
space.
They're gonna, I think they said that they're gonna give them half of that back. There was a calculation.
Like that,
Plus
that's just
they were
plus
gonna allow
any of the other,
rooftop gardens could be counted towards open.
all sorts of crazy stuff that does nothing. to
Retention
relieve the
ponds,
pressure of
right,
the density, so if you take those areas out where the density actually is, that number.
right.
Yeah.
But even just on the number of units, if you take the Utah average of 3 people per household, you get almost 19,000 people. You take Herriman's average, which was about 3.9, say 4 per house, now you're talking 25,000 people.
And you might have to have 6 people per house to afford the house payment.
The only places in the United States where you find 25,000 people living on 1.5 square miles is major metropolitan centers.
Exactly.
This is the single most dense suburban development in the United States. It is an extreme development. And to put that density
It's not well planned.
that is on a hope, not well planned, without specifics and timeframes and bindings on the developer to keep certain commitments, and to put that as far as you possibly can from entertainment centers, from services, from education, from employment. You are creating the worst development you could possibly invent. I mean, you can't do it worse than that.
But you're solving the housing shortage.
No, you're not.
So to that point, so that this is the only argument that I have heard of why it's quote needed, is that we have a housing shortage. The number that keeps getting floated, depending on which way they interpret it, because even Ken Gardner has backed off and said, well, it's somewhere between 35 and 45.
Used to be 50 then.
Well, if you take just the rough numbers that are gathered from the southwest cities, the number of units that are approved and unbuilt by the developers who have them approved already is nearly 30,000.
Right.
Just in the so that 35,
Not to
45
mention-
is statewide. Just in the southwest, there's roughly 25, 30. Got to nail down the numbers, but 25, 30,000 units approved unbuilt over the last 5, 6 years or so. There's no shortage of units. There's shortage of them actually building. And approving more units isn't going to help the building.
That's the problem. The other issue is, the Utah did a housing affordability study, that I just read the 2018 one, so I haven't found the 2019 one yet. I don't know if it's completed, but 2018 one showed that over the last 5 years, the demand for houses growing like this, but the building permits have been growing like this. We're getting wider in terms of demand versus supply. We're growing supply faster than demand right now. In addition to the fact that if you look at the numbers they talk about housing units that are available in the state versus the demand for housing, we have 100,000 unit surplus in our state. We have about a little over 1 million units, about 900,000 demand. There's no housing gap, there's no housing shortage. Those are false narratives.
We're preaching to each other.
The difference is there are No, let's talk about it, because this is the
Crazy.
crux of their issue. There are people making the lower incomes in the strata of incomes in our society. They usually use numbers at 60% of the median income or below. It is becoming increasingly difficult for these people to afford homes, right? That is a real problem, and that is something that we need to talk about.
Wages have not kept up with home prices.
Exactly.
Why have home prices risen? Because they're only building the bottom rung, right? I mean, post World War II, what's the American dream? Home ownership, suburban America, right? So you have,
Like picket
you
fence.
see me draw my bubble chart, right?
Right.
You have the majority of the supply was single family homes, and the quote, more affordable stuff was some condos and apartments, etc. But they built what the demand was for. Well, since the last housing crisis, right, at that point they overbuilt the McMansions, whatever, and whatnot. Years of barrenness, right, and they come in and build, quote, entry level. Well, now it's all, that entry level went from single family homes to townhomes, so that entry level bubble, right, made everything above it more expensive. And they haven't built anything for those entry level people to move on to, so existing homeowners aren't moving.
That's a big issue.
There's nowhere for people to move up
So
to.
the housing
all
availability
they just, it's their own worst enemy. They just keep building more of the same, and it rises the cost of everything above it.
The housing affordability study pointed
This
this
is
out.
economics.
No, there are one of the big issues is that people who can afford this level of house are living in this level of house right now. The $1,000 a month apartments are being filled up by people who could afford $1,500 a month apartments because there aren't enough of those.
Right.
Right? And so this is the problem. If you look at the last 5 years trend, it used to be single family homes, multifamily homes. Well, it's gone like this. And last year was the first year we had more multifamily permits than single family permits. Over that same 5 years, the rate of housing appreciation has increased proportionally. There's almost an exact correlation. I'm not saying that's the cause, because we can't,
Look at the numbers,
but come on.
But I mean, anecdotally, I'm a financial planner, so people I help them make decisions when to buy, what to buy, and I've not had a single person say, we set out to buy a town. They set out to buy a single family home and settled for what was available. That's all that's being built. So
Very much true. And to make it worse, if you're sincerely trying to help the 60% and below, 60% of the median income and below earners to find affordable housing, you couldn't pick a worse location because of not only housing costs,
higher
yeah,
living
not only
costs.
housing costs, but transportation costs. If you look at, there's a
Higher transportation, higher education, higher healthcare, everything. They're detached from services.
Yeah, there's an index, a national index is called the H+T, right? The housing plus transportation cost.
You want to cement people in poverty, build the project.
Exactly.
Yes, I
That's
had
what
that
it is.
conversation with a few of the council members, exactly that.
Did you get all those points? Do you understand everything? We'll just put those on the paper.
I'm glad we don't have to write it.
Jared does.
All I would ask is if we could get a copy just so that when we're responding to requests for information or anything, that we have
Use
the
of
same
that.
message.
I think we're generally in opposition to
Apparently
the
it's on
current
my
proposal. I think that would be the way to say it.
So, well, we have lots of phone calls next little bit here. We okay to move on?
Yeah.
2.12 Western Growth Coalition resolution. Gordon.
So Steve and I went to the Western Growth Coalition 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they are a group of communities all along the west side, and what they're interested in is trying to elevate the west side, getting transportation funds, particularly for projects on the Wasatch Front Regional Council Phase 1. So what this resolution does is basically ask the council, if each community passes it, to ask the state legislatures to fund a list of unfunded projects that are on the Phase 1 STIP transportation. This is from West Valley to Bluffdale. So that's the resolution.
And a couple of the key items that were on there, I mean, because you have to understand there's priorities in West Jordan and other places, but for us, the key things were the funding of the interchanges on Bangerter, right? And those are $50 million a piece. The
Plus, they mostly
134th and the 100 and 18th?
126.
One,
134.
126 is already paid for, right?
134th is not, 98th is not,
134th.
147th.
Yeah, so those were the priorities that they wanted to say, and they're proposed. We've also been told they have the money for it, actually, so we just wanted to let them know, this is it. You've already prepared for it, you've already got the money for it, please fund it, cause we need it.
We just wanted to compete with other regions, and so this is the idea of all the cities.
Yep.
We can still have our own priorities in the community that need to be done, but this is for all of us.
118.
It's not-
Yeah, no, I'm all for it.
Yeah, not
Like I said,
118,
it's one of the things that we've talked about is.
So
134th,
the next
Because
council
126 is
meeting
already
for a
planned
resolution
for.
to be
So-
passed.
And then,
So we'll bring this to
98th.
you on the 12th for, as a resolution to pass.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I'm
for
good with
example.
that.
I thought they were pretty good projects.
Just council
Are you
direction
still
was.
on
all
there,
those-
Clint?
We're on our UDOT, presentation this time last year in the legislative session, and that was the big thing, is that people don't realize that a lot of these things aren't funded. They might show up on plan, they're not funded. And then there's things that aren't even on the plan
Yeah.
that we got.
Yeah, we're just looking at clear direction because, I know council gave us direction in the past to be careful about resolutions because everybody wants you to pass them, right? So-
Yes, thank you. I'll say I've been
So
probably.
that's why we didn't run the general meeting. We thought, let's run the work meeting, get
Yeah,
But this, I guess my issue with resolutions is when we're asked to do something like that regarding something that voters are going to vote on.
Right,
So the school district asking us to do a resolution on their bond, that's not our deal.
right.
This is not something the voters vote on, this is
Committees.
communities banding together, so. that's all. Okay, 2.13, discussion regarding city boards and committees. Tammy, did we
Oh.
already do that?
we did, but you wanted to continue discussion, you all were talking dollars and cents.
Oh, yeah.
What, meetings you had, the time spent, so you wanted to come back and revisit the time that you guys were estimating that you put into each of those
Honestly,
meetings?
I was out of town Thursday and Monday, and I have not spent any time.
But part of the training I did today, because the water board does pay, and there is some state regulations on that that shows certain reimbursement things and stuff like that. So part of what they do is adopted from what the state says you should pay. Like you get paid a per diem if your meeting is up to 4 hours, or if it's 4 hours or longer, there's a different, like I think it's a 60 or 90. There's some guidance from there is what it sounded like, because she just said the reimbursement stuff on that is just based on what the state shows.
That'd be a good
Is
place
that-
to start,
Yeah.
right?
Is
What
that
would
if
be-
they pay it or if the city decides to compensate you for your time spent out of work?
I'm guessing it's a special services district kind of guidance.
Kind of thing, but it's good guidelines.
But it's good, it kind of
Good
gives
structure
good
to start
structure
with.
We'll look at
to
it.
look at.
We'll look it up and
Yeah,
find it.
I
push
just thought
out
it
as
might
well.
be a good structure to look at, because it was like that, it was like if you're in a meeting up to this many, they just automatically figure out, they just assume you're coming either from your home or from
Because
your
that's what
work,
we're
where
talking
you
about,
usually
is
are.
finding some sort of criteria to go by.
Yeah,
That's a
yeah.
great start.
okay, so let's just maybe take a look at that, because then that would say that, and then if it's, if it's just like that, if it's your typical, you go, you read your packet, you go there for the meeting, that's kind of how much time you spend. You just get paid for this much per meeting, which is what the state is kind of under that. But then if it's above and beyond that, you're spending many hours and different days and stuff
Every
like
meeting's
that.
scheduled for an hour, but it takes 3.
Right, then you
There's an
start
after
looking,
meeting.
yeah, then you start looking at, maybe that's a more time
And
commitment.
if the travel is downtown all the time, you've got
Yeah,
the commute.
But they have that even, they do,
In
the
their-
state has
that's
their
in there.
mileage that says this is
Yeah,
how much,
some of those-
and they have that
That's
as
the
part
time.
of it. And they just have it automatically set up, so they go, we're just always gonna assume you're coming from your home, or you're coming from your work, wherever you're always traveling from. And they just have the mileage already set up and just goes right in.
Mileage reimbursements is what it is, what common estimate to Steve kind of
The commuting time.
under over is the time that it takes to drive that extra distance.
Oh,
The real
good
time
point,
taken
good
away
point.
from
Yeah,
other
maybe a 30
things.
minute meeting, but it took you 2 hours to get there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's
But that's a good,
maybe a good
framework
place
to
to
start.
start, you know what I mean, that just
Yeah.
kind of, cause there's already
Yeah.
some guidance in there.
I like that, and if that's what, kind of the two that we're looking at as kind of poster child, if that's what they're built on anyway, that makes sense.
And we can start there, so we'll put that together and then bring it back so that you can evaluate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cause I'm guessing mosquito abatement's kind of the same way, cause again, it's a special services district and it's like so much per meeting, right? And so I would guess it falls under that state guideline, the same kind of thing.
And honestly, I can't give you any feedback yet. I don't know, I haven't even gone to
So
all my meetings,
So
let
bring
alone
this back in,
multiple
what,
meetings.
April, after we go through legislative session and, you know,
Steve needs to be crying a little bit first.
Okay.
Okay, and then on top of that, we had talked a little bit about, so we had the, Community Development Committee, which was economic development, kind of economic development planning and, engineering all into one. But because that's something that we will be forming, we just wanted to get an idea of if there were times that were better for that committee, how often, you know, what are the parameters of that committee? Do you want it to meet once a week, once a month, twice a month?
Once a quarter.
I don't think it's frequent enough.
I'm just kidding.
That's where I think we have to look,
Well,
that's where I think I have to, like, open my phone, cause I happened to be at another city up in another county just a couple days ago, and walked by and noticed this sign in there, that says community development, and then has bullet points, community development director, planning and zoning, building permits, building inspection, business licenses, and on the window next to it says community and economic development. So like, I was like, that's exactly what we were just talking about. As far as time commitment, I mean, we have to start with something, I guess, we would really look more towards you guys of, what do you think you need from us, and we'll start with that, and we can adjust it. Am I speaking out of turn? It's you know,
No, I think it's gonna be an evolving thing, right? I think we start out with saying, here's some of the topics we're discussing, here's some of the key issues that are, there's some cool plans that have been discussed, and then I
initially,
think,
we gotta catch up on.
yeah, it's gonna take us some
drink
time
from
to
the
kind of
fire
get
hose.
figure it out, and then we might determine, you know, we might go in saying, oh, we only wanna meet once a month, but we look at it and go, holy smokes, we should be meeting once a week, you know? And without any touch points yet, I don't know.
Are there times of day that are best? Because I know that,
Morning
I
is
know with
apparently.
your
Mornings
schedule.
are generally a little bit easier.
So
And I can be pretty flexible in the mornings too.
Stephen.
I mean, if I know far enough in advance, I can be flexible with most of my business commitments or after, kind of from lunch on.
Okay.
Evenings.
So what else you uncovered, Tammy, cause I have.
Okay.
Morning preparation, more fresh draw.
So that would also include, so Blake would be in that as kind of part of the transportation, but then we also have the traffic committee, which is like a traffic transportation committee, but that's the other one that you're on, but they discuss things that are a little bit different, and I thought Blake could kind of tell you what's discussed in traffic committee.
I think that's gonna be part of the process, is whittling down what to segment.
Which one would be,
DRCs are on Wednesday, so it's probably good to do it after DRC on like Thursday, so it's all fresh in our mind, development stuff.
that's later in the day, it's not in the morning.
Well, DRC is in the morning,
DRC.
but,
DRC
if you
is,
have
but-
the meeting on Thursday, those are
Thursday,
usually
right
the
after.
more open days.
Yeah.
For us.
For the community development meeting.
Thursday before noon, it's good for me.
I thought the traffic committee is more like some of the complaints are coming to see, so please everybody work out.
The development is more development
Transportation
plus
development.
how it affects or is intertwined with economic growth.
Traffic committee meets once a month, and we give you a report quarterly, that's what Bryce has been coming and doing. Really, a lot of that is, probably 70% of the items are police. Just, we're gonna enforce that, we're gonna go out and watch the speeders, we're gonna watch the stop sign, we're gonna put up a crosswalk station.
Reporting what they.
But the other 30% is, we want this, you know, new hawk signal or something like that. So, that's about how that committee balances out.
Thursdays before noon?
Okay.
Once a month? Twice a
Yeah.
month?
We'll get
So,
that set
I
up.
like Steve's suggestion where we get together and see how big the fire hose is you gotta drink from it. Play it.
I mean,
Until
almost
the first
almost
one.
like having an organizational meeting where we sit up and we kind of talk about things we want to talk about, and
On the first
Priorities
meeting for mid to end of February, give me enough time to plan and bring things to the table. And
I think
set up a
bi-weekly
couple
would be
hours
the
to
most
kind of
similar
meet and then
after
see how it goes
meetings
from there.
bi-weekly.
Yep. Okay, we'll get that done.
Where's the head, shoulders, knees, and toes?
Just wanna make sure you're covered everything you want to cover.
Almost there.
You guys look like
Herriman,
everybody's going,
so-
did you guys hurry this up?
Alright, moving on, 2.14 city manager updates, 5 minutes, go.
Okay.
So my timer.
No, it's more about some of the comments we had last week's meeting Wednesday, trying to get clarity and clarity and clear direction on, cause I worry about staff even using the word negotiation, because you said you wanna be part of the negotiation, so there's gotta be a difference between staff having discussions and working up to where it might be looking like some options, and that's why I think the trigger point becomes negotiation. Here again, I think it's valuable because it'll take staff off the hot seat and let this council involved early on a negotiation piece of that, so that we have a couple council members involved in that, so they make a recommendation to the rest of the council. And I'm actually very excited about it, by the way, but it'll just be more time. How do we structure that? Is that just as items come up, or is it gonna be one person from this community person and one from finance committee? What's gonna be the right blend to bring something back for you all to meet, bring that to council? I think it's their committee, basically, negotiation committee.
Oh, well, and I mean, when you get into that kind of council, there's five finalists you gotta talk to for negotiation, and we talked about, does that slow it down? Yeah, but that's kind of what we're supposed to do, is oversight, is slow things down.
Right, I'm very happy about it.
I don't know, I mean, I look at it from like a business point of view, typically in that situation, it's, well, say the team of staff have this much wiggle room. We can talk in general about the project, but when you wanna nail down, are the decision makers willing to do X, Y, Z? I don't know, I'll have to take that back to them.
Absolutely, that's the
And I
negotiation piece.
think you're in a really good point, is that I think there's a distillation that you guys can accomplish, getting it down to kind of some key points that need to be really decided. And I think those are the things we do have our involvement on, right?
Our team here, I'm saying, our team is not gonna ever say we're involved in negotiation here going forward. That will be when we bring council on board, we'll have discussions and bring options to council and trade for negotiation, bring the decision makers on board for that piece.
Yeah,
Have I understood that pretty clear then?
yeah, I think one of the things we're talking about, and I don't want to beat a dead horse or revisit it, but we've discussed that there was a decision made where something was just excluded from consideration because it was a bad deal.
Yep.
And council likely would have agreed with that decision, but I think we need to understand that's council's decision,
Yeah,
right?
and that wouldn't have, but that's still your decision.
You don't think council would have agreed with
I
that?
said, I hope you wouldn't, because
Right.
it's a bad deal, but it's still your
Sure,
decision.
right.
I agree with you saying, but
I'm saying, in that circumstance, that was one where I think
yeah,
we probably
we
would have.
learned a great deal by that, how much involvement the council wants, so we have no problem with it. If we involve you early on when it comes to the negotiation piece of options, here's what we know. Have you meet with the developer or the landowner, wherever, with our team, from economic development and finance and all that, so it is a dynamic of a new committee, basically. And
Well,
I'm
And
saying,
we can evolve that based on what our committee does too. It might give us some insight into,
It'll give you-
we wanna
it will
be
give you
involved in
insight.
these things, not so much in these things.
it will give you insight, but there's also, when you come to negotiation, there's a real financial component to those negotiations,
Yeah,
always.
Which is why that's
so
the
looks like,
part that has to come back.
That's why I was
Sure.
thinking about one of each, or alternator or
And
something.
I know that, you know, I bring this up all the time, and you mentioned every couple of years, that dynamic changes. And when
Yes.
I first started coming and sitting in those chairs as a resident, the council at the time was like, you guys just take care of everything.
Yeah, that's why they're good enough for it.
Right? And so it is a sea change, and I've said this a million times, and I know how you guys do it, cause every couple of years, that expectation changes, and so,
And we got some new clear direction last Wednesday, we're happy about it, so.
sorry, Sherry.
No, is there a lot of, situations like this, cause I'm wondering, because I understand where you would want the staff and just a couple of council to meet with them, but is it a situation where we should just have a special meeting for negotiations, where the council comes with staff and the developers or something?
Just
And
a
have it-
special meeting,
Like a
in the past,
negotiation work
we've
meeting.
given the
Yeah.
direction that a special meeting looks bad.
I don't disagree with that,
Sometimes.
because there's a point where council reasons collectively all need to hear the options. But I actually want to see some work done before that, because I want our team to make sure we're going down the right pathway as we're talking with them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think
that's
those little
part of the
smaller
process.
meetings would actually help. There's a little lighter, that are a little easier to schedule. And, that will give us good direction. So by the time you're ready to take it to council to a work meeting, saying, let's boil down through this, is this really good for us, or it's not good for us? And then give staff direction to do what you want.
And I don't know, and the reason I hesitate a little bit, cause I don't know if we wanna just designate 2 people, or if we wanna rotate people through
I don't
that.
think we wanna designate anyone in particular, like I said, there's 5 individuals
Yeah.
that need to weigh in.
Just
So
and
everybody's
rotate
gotta
it,
be involved.
just rotate it through.
I can just tell, cause
Send an
this is new,
invitation
it's kinda like
whoever
last
can make
Wednesday.
it.
Whoever gets.
The first 2 and then
First
we
2.
cut it off and then the next 2
Yeah.
maybe try to be the first.
A couple,
Hey.
a couple thoughts.
Oh,
if I
you
could.
there?
Hello.
Hey, he caught up on The Bachelor, so now he's back in.
Go ahead, Clint.
I agree with Stephen's comment a minute ago. You know, I think in something that I said last week too, I think there's obviously a difference between discussion and negotiation. And I think that, a lot of times staff has certainly the ability to discuss and distill down, to use Stephen's word, you know, down to some basic options there. I do like, Brett's idea of, you know, as we talked about these other committees that we're going to be, you know, representing there within the city, the finance and the economic development side of things. I do kind of like the thought of having, you know, one each. And again, we can rotate. It's going to be dependent on availability, obviously, of our individual schedules and those other things when those negotiation type meetings need to take place. But again, I think these different components that each of us are working on with sitting on these other committees bring important aspects to those negotiations, both the economic development side and the finance side. And that's why I really kind of like the idea of having one of each, and again, and making sure that we're rotating. Again, we've already talked previously that the key to all of this is just good communication, not only amongst ourselves as council, but amongst all of the city staff as well. And I think we have the ability, obviously, to be able to communicate and keep everybody in the loop of these things to where we get to where we bring these items into a formal meeting to have that full discussion and give clear direction and move forward. So that's just my thoughts. I kind of like the idea of kind of rotating those, but keeping one of each off of those committees involved.
So like it would be or Clint or I.
Like you or
and
Clint on one.
and then
Right, but it'd be, I think,
Yes,
kind of not happen organically. You might have a stronger interest, or you might have more availability or non-availability.
That's true.
I can tell you right now, as me and Gordon discussed this new approach, just like last week, he gave us a new direction. I think we jumped on it the next morning, right? We want to jump right on this. We have a lot of things up in there right now that we need to start having people meet and give us direction, because it's very clear we are not going to be in negotiation. We're going to be in discussion with these landowners and developers, to be clear.
I
And
think
you got to haul with Automall and those other things. So.
I think we understand that by kind of tapping the brakes on the CDAs and saying we need to organize some of this better, it could potentially delay some of those
Yep, and we'll get that message, we'll get that message to people we're working with and let them know that we're seeing renewed direction and we're gonna honor it, and we're gonna tap the brakes a little bit or ride the brake a little bit, slow down. And it will still process. Once we catch up with it, it will seem like it's just the process that you think you should have learned that
We
earlier.
made that point.
The first few weeks is always painful, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Pretty much the first year.
Yeah. Two. Or 4.
So that's all I had, Jared. Just want to keep it simple. Those are only 2 things that kind of stuck out to me that I'd wait to see what Tammy had to cover, but.
That was just on the board of committees. Do you have a city manager update?
That was it.
Oh, wow.
That's why
Do we have
I can promise you, unless it's an emergency, it's not gonna come on CM update, so. One thing I would also tell you, you gave a lot of dialogue, with the council standard operating procedure and how you act on certain things and the new employee's handbook. Jacqueline was out of town, we're glad she took a little bit of vacation. but she has not had time to review that in the minutes. We've not had a chance to sit down and talk about things that you wrote down, we wrote down that you wanted changed, to get you another draft out to you for review. Hopefully next couple, let's say by the next council, hopefully we'll have it in front of you to have it in the packet for
Considering the stack
review.
of things we've given you, I don't know if that's
I just apologize, and we got a lot of things done that you gave direction on, but that was one we couldn't get around to this week.
I don't think it was pretty clear.
I just wanna know we didn't forget.
Circle back around.
We know what to do, you guys just gotta catch up with paperwork.
Right.
Okay, so you wanna make a motion?
Go for it.
Motion temporarily recess the city council meeting to convene in closed session for the purpose to discuss pending or reasonable imminent litigation and the purchase, exchange, or lease of real property as provided by Utah Code and 3-52-4-235.
Second.
Clint? I need a yes or no.
Yes.
Sherry?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
I'll vote yes, we are temporarily recessed and into our closed session.